Hurricane Idalia made landfall in the Big Bend of Florida as a major hurricane here with some record storm surge. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci from the Lee Weather Team. Joined with me, my weather brother Sean Sublette here. And Sean, you know, we're still going to be talking about this storm for what, the next 7 days?
Yeah, the biggest impacts are the next 48 hours, but we'll talk more about what happens after that. It's going to just kind of hang offshore for a while. But I think as you and I were talking yesterday, we were very concerned about rapid intensification taking place, as you and I were talking
Yep.
midday yesterday,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely what happened. It briefly was a category 4 just an hour or two before landfall, before edging off a tiny bit.
Yeah, yeah. So it could have been worse, and it got close, but still a Category 3 hurricane is something that is very significant here. So we just said landfall earlier this morning as a strong Cat 3. Did so right around 8 o'clock Eastern time here. Rain, wind, coastal flooding uh, includes all the southeast is what I'm trying to say here. As we go forward over the next 48 hours, and then the storm will stall off the Atlantic coast this weekend. And like we said, we could be talking about this for the next week, right through Labor Day weekend for sure, with indirect impacts from the Jersey Shore all the way down to Florida here. Let's take a look at Idalia from our Wednesday morning here. And look at this about 7 a.m. You can kind of see a little yellow spot just south of Perry, Florida. That is the eye of the storm, and it made landfall and then quickly moved to the northeast here, and it was just a very well defined storm. I mean, it had that circular look to it on this infrared satellite that we've seen. The eye actually went away early in the morning on Tuesday, excuse me, today on Wednesday, but then reformed that eye from the surface all the way up just before it made landfall. But we're still talking about watches and warnings in Florida and all the way up to parts of the southeastern coast.
Yeah, the hurricane warnings will probably come down in the next 6 or 12 hours for the Gulf Coast of Florida. But you see now they've been posted for far southern South Carolina, most of the Georgia coastline, St. Simon's Island, Savannah, those locations. They will have hurricane conditions later today. They're already having that heavy, intense rain right now. But hurricane winds, again, those are 75-mile-an-hour sustained winds. But because of the track of the storm, and remembering that the flow around that is in a counterclockwise fashion, there's a storm surge warning for Savannah and extending up toward Charleston, South Carolina. Even though the storm will not be as strong as it was just 6 hours ago, there is enough of an intense onshore wind component to drive that ocean water inland. So that's why the storm surge warning continues for these areas on the Atlantic coast, against Savannah, basically going up into Charleston, South Carolina. Most of the winds, have done what we kind of thought they were going to do. Take us through some of the high values so far, Joe.
Yeah, and we did see top wind gusts at 85 miles an hour in 3 spots in Florida so far, including the Perry Foley Airport. We've been talking about Perry over the past couple of days, Sean. So this is the spot we thought would be close to the center of circulation, and it was. I have a asterisk next to Horseshoe Beach because it got up to 77 miles an hour, and then the anemometer broke and it couldn't measure winds anymore. That happens sometimes during hurricanes, so it couldn't hold up. But I'm sure gusts were even higher there in Horseshoe Beach, and then also with the sustained winds, they were strong as well throughout Florida and have been and will continue to be as we go into the afternoon hours here. Now, Sean, we go forward in time with the winds. Tell us what we got going on with our tropical sustained winds coming up.
Yeah, as we move towards 6 p.m. this evening on the map, you see that kind of hole right there near Savannah. That's where the center of circulation is. And to get your bearings, the blues are where you're starting to get a little breezy, and then these oranges and reds is where the wind is the strongest. We move the clock forward to midnight tonight, and then the center's over Charleston, South Carolina, and there's all that very intense wind just offshore, which is why we still have the storm surge warnings. Then moving into first thing on Thursday morning, overwhelming to North Carolina, and then finally shifting farther offshore. So as late as Thursday evening and first thing on Friday morning, there's still some very strong winds along the outer banks of North Carolina, even though the core of the system will be better than 100 miles offshore. So they're going to still have to deal with some strong gusty winds on the Outer Banks for most of Friday. The specifics, the midday advisory from the Hurricane Center has the maximum winds at 90 miles an hour with Idalia, and its forward speeds picked up at 20 miles an hour. So certainly accelerating over these past 12 to 18 hours or so. There's a projected track, as we suggested there, by 8 o'clock on Friday morning. It is a good bit offshore. But Joe, as you and I were talking about yesterday, after that, it's just going to go out there and hang out a few hundred miles offshore probably all Labor Day weekend. A lot
Yeah.
of the early suggestions are that it probably stays offshore, but that's not a done deal to this point. Take us to through why that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we talked about this yesterday. There's just nothing really to push it around or steer it. So, this is our setup from Thursday evening here. You see the storm, getting through to Carolinas. And then what happens is we get a high pressure system, a surface high, which builds into the Midwest. What that's going to do is prevent it from, moving north or northwest. But at the same time, the steering currents that would take it out to sea just aren't there either. So what happens is the high pressure kind of bullies this thing towards Bermuda as it gets closer to the East Coast. And then as it retreats westward into Labor Day, it's going to allow that system to start retrograding west or moving westward as we go into next week. So, Sean, I mean, we're going to be, again, talking about this storm through Labor Day weekend into probably the middle part of next week, if not the later part of next week. It's going to be a much weaker storm where or
Yes.
if it makes landfall. So that is key. But if you're like me at the Jersey Shore, if you're Sean down in Virginia or anywhere in the Southeast, rip currents, high surf, we're just getting started with this. Really, we got another week, I think, of this to come. So a lot of indirect impacts will still continue as we go forward in time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to the beach this weekend, especially in the southeastern coastline, you're still going to have rip currents in the high surf, even once the storm is 300 miles offshore, because it's just not going anywhere. And we're still climbing the ladder to the peak of hurricane season, right? The seasonal
Yep.
climatology, we're almost there, but it's like September 10th ish or
Yeah.
so is when the climatological peak of hurricane season is. And there are some suggestions, Joe, looking at the medium range guidance that after we get through Labor Day weekend, it's probably quiet for a few days, but we've got to watch the African coastline for some more waves that could be coming in later next week.
Yeah.
So this is kind of prime time for hurricane season.
Yeah, and those Cape Verde storms, that's what they're called. They roll
Hmm.
off the African coast. Those are things that we can talk about easily for 10 days as it makes its way from the
Yeah.
coast, and maybe to the United States. Hopefully not, but maybe, to the United States. Our thoughts and prayers are with everybody in Florida here
Yeah.
in the Big Bend and going into Georgia and the southeastern coast as this storm comes on through. We're going to continue to keep you updated as we go on throughout the week. We'll look to do daily updates, definitely tomorrow, probably Friday as well. And then we'll take it from there. So thanks again for watching Hurricane Hunt. It means a lot to us that you come to us for your weather information. For Sean Sublette, I'm Joe Martucci, and we'll talk with you soon.